The thing I've learned in the last year and a half is, as I've dug much deeper into this value world, is that there's a tendency for a lot of us when we're trying to sell our value to do exactly that, to sell our value. So just like we might show up and throw up with products, I tend to show up and throw up with a calculation, look how much money I can make you or save you. And we think that somehow by making customers more confident in the ways that we're going to produce value for them, that somehow that's going to make them buy. What I've found at a high level is that what'll happen is that you'll show the calculation, the ROI, the lifetime value to your customers. More often than not, they'll look at it and they'll agree to the numbers. They won't dispute the math, but they'll dispute the relevance of the math. They'll look at it and say, yeah, but we've decided to go in a different direction. Or I'd buy this if I could today, if it were just up to me, but as a company, we're just not ready. Or my CFO's looked at this and she's got some different questions. And what you find ultimately is that they say the math is last. And I think that's right, because if you just show up with the math being first, it's very much like Challenger, don't lead with, but lead to. You can't lead with the math. You got to lead to it, because ultimately what you find is, I think the value calculation really isn't so much an input of customer deliberation, but an output. So in other words, if I'm going to show you the math, you're going to buy because you're going to be more confident. But what customers need to be confident in isn't so much you, but themselves. And really their alignment around what I call objectives, tactics, metrics, targets, timelines, which is just a fancy way of saying, what are we even trying to do in the first place? Because if we're not agreed as a buying group on our objectives and how to get there and how to measure them, what our targets are, then your math is irrelevant, because that math has to exist in context, and you have to set the context before you set a math. Or maybe the value calculation belongs on your website, but not so much as a, here's the calculation already done and dusted for you, but rather as an interactive tool, so that you could say, of the 5 objectives I could pursue, which of these 3 matters most to me? And here's some guidance on how other companies like you are thinking about it. So imagine if your website was essentially a conversation where it helps you and guides you and frames your thinking around objectives, tactics, metrics, and targets and timelines, such that in the end, the output of that exploration on your website was a value calculation, as opposed to I just go to your website and there's the value calculation. This is collaborative, interactive ideas, really, where you have to co-create not so much the calculation, you've got to co-create a vision of what you're even trying to do in the first place. And that's where I think there's huge opportunity in digital for that.